I'm Jonathan Bryce with the OpenStack Foundation, and very happy to be here. This is I guess the third event that I've been to here in Tel Aviv, and they're always a lot of fun to come and meet up with the community here. We have been doing a series of OpenStack events. In the last week and a half, we've been in Istanbul, Budapest, London, Berlin, Frankfurt, and now Tel Aviv. So it's been a lot of fun to travel around and see different members of the community. I wanted to start off just by updating everyone on a few things that have happened since the last time I was here, and then also some of the things from our most recent summit in Vancouver. The OpenStack summits are the big events that we do twice a year. First of all, one of the questions that we always get centers around who's using OpenStack. And we've had a lot of great companies who have come out and talked about how they're using OpenStack in the last year. Companies like Wells Fargo, they came and spoke at our summit in Atlanta along with Disney. And then just a few months back, we had another company that came out and started talking about their OpenStack usage. This is, I think, a great quote. And when you fill in the blank, it turns out that it's the largest company in the world. And they ran all of their holiday shopping on top of OpenStack in production. So for Walmart, the largest retail company in the world, to place that kind of a bet on OpenStack, I think that speaks to the power of this technology that our community is building together. This shows a little graph of the build that Walmart has done internally over the last 2 years. They started out in 2012, and they ramped up and kind of learned their way through OpenStack for about a year and a half, and then really went big. And now they have over 150,000 cores that are powering different systems inside of Walmart. Another case study that we did last year dealt with an automaker. It's one of the top 10 automakers in the world. Talked about how they're doing big data and analytics with OpenStack. They built an appliance that does big data analysis across all of these data sources to feed back into different parts of their business. And they had a proprietary system that they were using before to try to do this with that cost about $1.2 million US. They built it on OpenStack for $125,000, so just about a tenth of the cost, and were able to actually get better performance out of it. And then finally, this is a user that spoke at our summit in Paris in November, Tapjoy, and they talked about the data science that they do to power mobile analytics and mobile advertising, 500 million monthly users. They built a private cloud, shifted some of their data science workloads off of the public cloud, and for the same price, we're able to get 5 to 10x the performance and capacity. So, a great use case and a great result for them as a business. And that's just some of the users that have spoken in the last year. I'm not sure what's going on with the video here. See it blinking behind me. If you want to hear more user stories, you can go to our website, and we have lots of videos with users from all over the world and all kinds of different industries and use cases who talk about what they're doing with OpenStack and how it's changing their business. And for a lot of companies, what it comes down to is that we all rely on software more than ever before, and we all have to build software in order to stay competitive. And this is true not just in the high-tech industry, but you can look at traditional industries like finance and retail, hotels, taxi service. They're all being disrupted by companies that are using software to find new ways to meet customer needs. Airbnb is up here. Airbnb is basically a hotel company that doesn't own a hotel. And they totally have changed the way that people travel and stay. Amazon has totally changed the way that people buy things. And this is why Walmart is building out a massive software development competency, because they have to compete. And if we look forward to where things are going with the Internet of Things, this is just getting started. All of the devices that are constantly connected, producing data, and that data has to be processed That's one of the next big opportunities. We're going to hear from Deutsche Telekom in just a few minutes. NFV and the network and the kind of this big remaking of the infrastructure that runs our mobile and data networks, that's a huge opportunity. And all of this is really great for OpenStack, because if you look at all of these applications, all of these use cases, ultimately they do three things. They process data, they store data, and they move data. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter what application, what format, how you consume it. In the back end, there are systems that are processing data, storing data, and moving data. And that's exactly what OpenStack creates, and what OpenStack provides is a platform for compute, storage, and networking. This is a very high-level overview of OpenStack. It's a graph that a lot of you have probably seen. If you drill down a little deeper into it, the thing that's really important to remember with OpenStack too is that it's a very pluggable framework that supports dozens and dozens of technologies. On the compute side, with virtualization, all of the major hypervisors are supported. On the storage side, there are over 60 different storage platforms that plug into OpenStack on the back end. And some of those are high-end enterprise storage systems like EMC and NetApp and IBM and HP, and some of them are open source storage systems like Ceph and Gluster and others. Same thing is true on the networking side. So you put all of this together, and it's about compute, storage, and networking always, but OpenStack really serves as an amazing integration engine to bring all of these technologies together in a single platform. And that's very, very powerful. This is what's bringing these big enterprises like Wells Fargo and American Express and Walmart and others to OpenStack, because they have needs that are not just greenfield, that are not just any kind of new application where they get to use whatever the latest technology is. They have legacy systems that are still critical to their business, and they need something that can work with those while also positioning them to adopt the next wave of technology. And that's, I think, what's really interesting about OpenStack is it lets you meet both of those needs. And if we're talking about technology, new technologies, adopting technology, you can always, I think, graph things out on kind of these two axes of maturity and adoption. How well built is a technology and how widely deployed is it? When you do this, you kind of end up with four quadrants. The things that are new and not widely used, those are things that are basically experiments, when it's not widely adopted and it's not widely used. If it goes through a rapid adoption cycle and it's not very old, not very mature, sometimes people call those unicorns. If it stays around for a long time but doesn't gain a lot of adoption, those are niche technologies. And the things that are really the ones that last and that people count on and really want to make use of are the ones that are widely adopted, that are mature, and that provide a broad set of capabilities. But the thing to remember is that experimentation is what leads to those winners. That's how you get to the breakthroughs on it. And if we go back 5 years and we look at some different technologies on kind of this grid, one of the things that you might remember was kind of just achieving that breakthrough point was virtualization technology. And this was at the same time that OpenStack was just getting started. So OpenStack was very experimental 5 years ago. Virtualization was just starting to kind of achieve the breakthrough. When you move 5 years on now, both OpenStack and virtualization have achieved wide adoption. Virtualization, of course, is nearly ubiquitous in every organization. And so that's kind of the path that things take. And within OpenStack itself, there are a ton of different technologies that have been developed since we started OpenStack with just some compute and storage technologies. And you can also graph these on this quadrant. And you have new projects like Magnum and Murano. You have the long-time projects like Nova and Swift and Glance and others. And This is an important thing to remember when you look at OpenStack and when you work in the OpenStack ecosystem, is that OpenStack has an incredible breadth of technology, and but at the same time, these are at different stages of development and adoption. I hope you got the picture before it blinked off again. And so if you are building a system that needs to scale and be very reliable, these ones up at the top right, they've been tested and proven to do that. Maybe you need to take advantage of a new capability like big data or containers in order to meet a business need. OpenStack has that too, but you might need to be prepared for a little more of an experimental ride. So if we think about technologies that today are in that experimental phase, there's probably a big one that a lot of people are looking at and thinking about, and of course that's container technology. How many of you are interested in Docker? Right? Okay, but how many of you are using Docker in production today? See, that's an experiment. The technologies that everybody is interested in but not yet using, those are the ones that are down in that quadrant. And there are a lot of those that are coming out. Really exciting technologies. They change the way that we can approach problems, but a lot of people, we're trying to figure out how do we make use of them, how do they fit into our business, what's the right way to adopt them and get the most advantage of them without disrupting the things that we need to accomplish. And one of the things that's interesting is this is another area where OpenStack can help. If you look at some of these technologies, they are all kind of down in the young, emerging technology area. But unlike 5 years ago when OpenStack started and virtualization was well ahead, now we're in a position where for each of these technologies, there's actually OpenStack projects that are being developed in concert with them. And that provides a lot of value as you try to figure out how to adopt these. Because if you have an OpenStack environment, as you look out 5 years, it's hard to say who the container winners are going to be right now. We know that containers are an awesome technology and they're going to provide a lot of value, but how do you decide who's going to win? It's hard to say, but if you have OpenStack underneath, you're well positioned to take advantage of whoever wins, because again, they all rely on processing data, storing data, and moving data. Another thing that's interesting about OpenStack that I think is important to remember is a lot of people think of OpenStack as virtualization, virtualization management. Sometimes people used to think it was a hypervisor, but it's actually always been more than that, and that support is even stronger now. Whether you're doing virtual machines on any hypervisor or whether you want to manage bare metal provisioning in order to get the maximum performance or access to a specific type of hardware. If you want to run containers inside of VMs, if you want to run containers on bare metal, OpenStack has capabilities for all of those, and it can unify that all into a single interface so that you can bring these technologies in, mix and match them, and really build out a very robust environment that's still manageable. So that's kind of the platform overview. But the other thing that it's really cool about OpenStack, and that feeds into a couple of announcements that we just made within the last few weeks, relates to how you consume OpenStack. OpenStack is not just software. It's a platform that you can provision as a private cloud inside of your environment, behind your firewall, with all of your physical security in place, or you can consume it as a public cloud from a service provider who is allowing you to rent it by the hour and manage it as an OpEx rather than capital expenses. The thing that we just announced was our first round of interoperability testing. And we call this OpenStack Powered. And this is a set of tests and a set of required included code pieces so that as you make use of an OpenStack cloud and it has passed the OpenStack Powered designation, you know that it's running the same code with the same APIs, and it's something that within a core set of capabilities is going to look and act the same. We started rolling out this testing And if you go to openstack.org/marketplace, you'll start to see that there are different logos and test results that get shown for products that are in the marketplace. We already have about 16 or 17 different companies who have gone through this process and passed this testing, including Stratascale, who's one of the Israeli companies that's sponsoring here, and others all over the world. And this is really powerful because it means that within these base set of capabilities, as you move between public clouds and private clouds, hybrid clouds, different distributions, there's a base level of interoperability and compatibility across all of these. And how do you decide which things fit into that core definition? If we go back to this chart, it's really based off of the ones up there in the top right that are the most mature, that are most stable, that are the most widely adopted. Those are the ones that are required and that are present everywhere and that give you that foundation. And so that's kind of the core. And as you look at all of those other technologies, that's great innovation that you can plug in and put on top of it. The other announcement that we made recently dealt with identity federation. If you have a big pool of compute storage and networking across all of these these clouds around the world, public and private and hybrid, what you really want to be able to do is link them together and view them as kind of one set of resources. And so in the most recent release, the OpenStack Kilo release, it was the culmination of a lot of work on identity federation over the last 12 to 18 months. And it allowed you to be able to federate identity between OpenStack clouds using the Keystone Identity Service. And when we were in Vancouver, we did a little demo and a use case. How many of you were in Vancouver at the summit? Okay, cool. So some of you saw this. That was based off of the film and TV industry. This is an industry that's going through a lot of change. It's becoming much more geographically dispersed. And that creates interesting problems because how do they move their data around? How do they keep it all secure? How do they get it where it needs to be so it can be reviewed, edited, approved? But it's also a massive amount of data. This was a statistic that blew my mind when I first heard it. For some of these TV shows, an hour-long TV show is about 44 minutes of content. Does anybody want to guess how many minutes of footage they can shoot to get those 44 minutes of content? 40,000. It's actually 200,000. 3,600 hours. They'll be shooting 15, 20 different cameras, multiple takes, 12 to 14 hours a day, and it produces hundreds of thousands of minutes to get down to that 1 hour of TV. And then they have to go through this review process. And the people at each step of this review process are also spread out all over the world. And so how do they manage that? They're dealing with multiple regions, different clouds, and they used to do this by shipping data around physically. They would FedEx drives back and forth. But that resulted in lost data, data getting into the wrong hands. And so there's been a big shift in the film and TV industry to move to cloud-based workflows that enable them to meet all these needs and actually even do new things with the content. So the demo that we did in Vancouver was an example that included a production company called Digital Film Tree. And they had a private OpenStack cloud in Los Angeles, a private OpenStack cloud in Vancouver, and they federated the authentication and the identity from their private cloud to HP's public cloud and to a hosted private cloud at Blue Box, which is now owned by IBM. And by doing that, they were able to take their existing workloads, their existing applications that they built, and scale them across these different environments. So, it's not just about the data and all of the raw footage that they get, but they constantly have to transcode that into different formats. So they can edit it in the color correction software, so they can do special effects, so they can review it on mobile devices. And when they get when they start a new show, rather than going out and buying hardware, they're able to burst into a public cloud and use extra capacity there. So this is a real-world workflow that takes advantage of this capability. And the thing that's neat is this is a brand new feature. And it just came out in our release a couple of months ago. But there's a whole set of companies, over 30 of them, that have committed to supporting this in 2015. And this is really the reality of a vision that we've had since the beginning of OpenStack, to create a global pool of clouds, compute, storage, and networking resources, public, private, hybrid, and being able to mix and match them and bring them all together. And so it's really exciting to see this all coming together, to see how our community of users and developers and companies has executed on this vision and really is realizing the full potential. It's also exciting to see the things that are going to be built on top of it. And along those lines, one of the things that we announced in Vancouver as well was a new community app marketplace. And this is at apps.openstack.org. And this is just getting started. You can go there and you can find patterns and template files for interesting applications. Some of them are some of those new technologies like Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry. Some of them are traditional apps like Oracle. And these templates there's a set that's already in there. People are adding new ones all the time. If you're an operator, it gives you a way to share the things that you've learned, share the patterns and the heat templates and the images that you've made in order to run different applications, and share them with the community. So if you're running OpenStack, go check out apps.openstack.org and help us populate this and get cool new applications in there. Just a couple of things to wrap up. As Nadi mentioned, the next OpenStack Summit is going to be this October in Tokyo. And at the end of the day, for those of you that weren't here at the beginning, we're going to be giving away a couple of tickets to the summit in Tokyo, so that you can come check out all of the great OpenStack things happening in Japan. After that, next spring, we will be back in the US in Austin, Texas. And that's going to be a really interesting one, back to where it all started. And then following that, we'll be back in Europe and in Barcelona at October of 2016. So that's my time. Thank you all very much.